Your friend Vini, who we will see this summer in Copa America, I asked the question out there on X, is he, at this point right now, the best player in the world? Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi, Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue colored glasses. This show will be talking UCL final, CCC final, MLS's dilemma, Emma's era, boys in the boat, Chicho from downtown, Atlanta changes, winning Copa, toughest players, and so much more. But first, joining me as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how you doing on this June 3rd in the year 2024?
I'm doing well. I thought about wearing an eagle outfit for today's podcast.
Yes. We had an eventful week last week doing some production for the show that will become readily apparent here in the coming weeks. The men and women behind the camera were incredible. Those of us in front of the camera, less so, but we had a really good time, and you will see the fruits of all of their labor here in the next couple of weeks. It was fun. I'm telling you right now, we've come a long way, baby, since that closet over there that we started this show with. Now we got production, and we got incredible talent and men and women behind the scenes that make us look good. So it's a labor of love, but that labor is done by a lot of really, really competent and talented and wonderful people. So it's cool. Have you watched anything, my friend?
I don't really have anything new. I finished a book this weekend, and I'm debating whether to shut it down for the summer because, once the tournaments start, I'm not going to be able to watch or read anything. So is there any point in starting something new at this point? If I were to sneak in one more TV show before the Euros starts, it would be this show, The Sympathizer, which aired on HBO. It's about the end of the Vietnam War. So I might bang that out this week. Maybe not. We'll see.
Okay. So you don't have any type of escape when you're doing a show. You're a full-on 100% in.
Correct.
Because you don't want one, or there's not enough time?
Not enough time.
Yeah, I get that. You do have to try to get away to the extent that you can, but we'll be burning it at both ends going forward. I only have one. The Boys in the Boat. I think you might have mentioned this before. Anyway, this came out a while ago. Movie about the University of Washington rowing team that qualified for the 1936 Olympics in Germany. How it all came about, the money that they raised, and then ultimately winning gold medal over in Germany in the Olympics. Wonderful. I thought it was a really, really well done movie. I am also told, although I didn't read it, speaking of books, that the book is incredible, and it's obviously based off of that book. So I might go back and read it. But just a real feel-good, enjoyable type of movie. I think that they really did the period piece really well, which is not always good. So kudos to the folks back there. Mosse, before we get into this, I know that somebody on X was having a little go at us because we talk about the things that we have watched, and this is a staple of the State of the Union and stuff like that. I kind of look at it as we do want to know what you think, and we will try to cater this show to the people that listen and to the people that watch. However, there's that famous Aesop's fable of the father, the son, and the donkey. And basically the moral of the story is if you try to please everybody, you please nobody. And so there does have to be sometimes where we just go with what we know, go with our gut, and recognize that not everybody is going to like it. So if you don't like the fact that we talk about what we watch, I don't know who is out there that doesn't, but evidently we found somebody out there that doesn't. Just fast forward it.
Yeah, the genesis of it was during the pandemic when all the soccer leagues shut down, but we kept doing the pod. We started talking about shows that we were binging, and then we just kept doing it even when soccer returned. We've made it the opening segment of our pod. I like it, but, some people don't.
The other side of it is there might be people that don't care at all for anything that we say when it comes to soccer and only listen for our recommendations. My mom might be one of them out there because I know how much she takes our recommendations to heart. When I say our recommendations, mostly your recommendations. All right, my friend, should we light this candle?
Let's do it.
Where should we start?
We had two continental finals on Saturday. We'll take them in chronological order. First, the UEFA Champions League. Real Madrid claimed a 2-0 win over Borussia Dortmund at Wembley. Both goals in the second half, Dani, Carvajal, and Vinicius Jr. Real Madrid claimed their 6th Champions League title in the last 11 seasons, and it's their 15th European Cup crown. That's more than double any other club.
So there is the actual accomplishment, which, like you said, is just incredible. And, this is an elite super club. So we certainly should expect them to win. But then there's how they actually go about doing it. At what point, Mosse, because there is an element of chaos and risk associated with this Real Madrid team, but it seems to just be baked in. And at what point does it actually become a principle or a style of play? Because we all know luck only lasts so long, and eventually you will go to the well and it will be empty. And yet this Real Madrid team seems to empty that well, go back to it, and still find something else in it on a continual basis.
You're right. It's incredible. I spoke to my dad before the match, and we both agreed that while Real Madrid were overwhelming favorites, it wasn't going to be a case where they were going to stamp their authority on the match from start to finish. That's not how they roll in the Champions League. There has to be some drama. There has to be some adversity. And sure enough, they were awful in the first half. Dortmund was the much better team, created incredible chances, should have been winning. But Real Madrid hung in there and eventually found a way, as they always do. And you're right. I keep waiting for one of these days that approach to come back to bite them, but it never does.
So the questions are then, is this a great team? And is Carlo Ancelotti a great coach?
I definitely think Ancelotti is a great coach. The resume speaks for itself. 5 Champions League titles. Plus, as I said recently on the pod, I think he's an underrated tactician. There's this notion that he's just a man manager who keeps things simple, and he perpetuates that sometimes. There are some Ancelotti quotes where he talks about, my job is not to screw things up and just to get out of the way and let the players win the game. But I think that belies the fact that he does do some interesting tactical stuff and is able to figure out solutions when they have injuries and lose players, and he moves guys to different positions. So I think he is a great coach. But yeah, as to whether they're an all-time great team, it's an interesting question. Yeah, the trophy cabinet would suggest they are, but we tend to view the truly great teams as ones that dominated and played sparkling football and blew away the competition, like some of the great Barcelona teams with Pep and MSN and even Manchester City last season. And Real Madrid, they never elicit that feeling. As you're watching them, it doesn't feel like you're watching some transcendently great team. It's just the end result ends up being that they always win.
Yeah, I'm going to answer my own question in that I think that this team is great, and I think that Carlo Ancelotti is great. And the greatness from an Ancelotti perspective is his innate ability to motivate and to calm and to, use this calmness that he has to fuel his team to never believe that it's just not going to be one of our days. I don't know. I would think that he doesn't want that to happen. But when it happens, and it happens a lot with this team, there is no panic. And I think that starts from the top in a recognition that maybe more so than any other sport, you have the least amount of effect as a coach from the outside, as a manager from the outside. And yet, in this instance, I am giving him credit for having a calming effect on these players in that they believe even when they are playing like crap, and they were playing like crap, and to your point, they should have been down 2 and 3-0, and giving up huge opportunities that you would not associate with an elite team out there, especially playing against someone like Borussia Dortmund, didn't panic and found a way back in. And yet it's not surprising to anyone, ultimately, the results, but it shouldn't be surprising anymore that this is the way that they get results. Is it sustainable? Well, they've just proven that it is.
It is amazing, though. Courtois tears his ACL. You think that's going to be a big issue. Lunin steps in and is amazing for most of the season. And then when Lunin has a bit of a dip at the end, that's when Courtois comes back, doesn't miss a beat, and looks like the best goalkeeper in the world again. So they were always in good hands and goal no matter what this season.
Your friend Vini, who we will see this summer in Copa America, I asked the question out there on X, is he, at this point right now, the best player in the world?
I have a lot of thoughts on Vinicius Jr., so if you'll indulge me, that's going to be the next 5 minutes of this podcast. First off, although I'm a Brazilian and I do love him, My answer would be no. I still think Mbappe is the best player in the world. Interestingly enough, Real Madrid are going to announce Mbappe today, so they're now going to be teammates moving forward. I do think Vinicius has established himself as the other guy in that debate. Last season, it was Mbappe versus Haaland. Early this season, it was Mbappe versus Bellingham. I think right now, if you were to have a best player in the world debate between Mbappe and somebody else, Vinicius is probably that somebody else. I do think the notion that he's the clear frontrunner for the Ballon d'Or is a bit overstated. He's certainly a strong contender for it, but there are other players that are right there, and the summer tournaments are going to dictate it. Keep in mind, Vinicius is a polarizing figure. The last couple of years, he's tended to finish lower than he probably should have in the Ballon d'Or voting, so he's going to have to overcome that if he is to win it. He would be the first Brazilian winner since Kaká in 2007. Last point. There is a concern for me as a Brazilian that Vinicius' success is going to validate this notion that if you're a Brazilian phenom, the thing to do is to go to Europe as young as possible. I do think people need to understand Vinicius is an outlier. For a player like him to have gone to Real Madrid at the age that he did, with the flaws that he had in the stage of his development that he was in, to go through the growing pains he did, and then to come out of it a full-blown superstar with the same playing style he had before. The fact that that wasn't beaten out of him at all, I think is absolutely remarkable. If you replayed his career 10 times, we ended up with the best possible outcome. But I do think for every one of him, you're still going to have a lot of guys that are going to fail completely, or guys that are going to succeed in a Gabriel Jesus kind of way, guys that had star potential, but then went to a context in Europe that turned him into more of a functional player. That's even happening to some degree with Rodrigo, the other Brazilian attacker on Real Madrid. So I think it's something that Brazilians need to be leery of. I still think in the long run, every Brazilian talent going to Europe at 18 is creating more of a hit or miss quality than there should be and lowering the ceiling of a lot of players. So I still don't think it's the ideal path, but it's certainly worked out with Vinicius Jr.
I will say this. I think he benefits from being Brazilian. If he was the exact same player and was not Brazilian, still playing for Real Madrid, still doing that, I don't think that we would look at him in the same way. I do think that there is an argument for him to be the best player in the world. Do you buy the other argument that we have heard where the international aspect of it, playing for Brazil, and as you have rightly pointed out over the years, he has not been great for Brazil. Does he have to have a great moment, great summer? We could possibly see it here in Copa America to really validate the best player in the world arguments.
I do think that, yeah. I agree with Anna Jerka, who replied to your post, our colleague, who we're excited to work with again this summer. Yeah, I think he has to do it for Brazil this summer to validate it. It is interesting. He has struggled for Brazil, but he is on track to having perhaps the best European club career of any Brazilian. Now, I don't think he's as good as the Romarios and Ronaldos and Rivaldos and Ronaldinhos. Kaká, you could debate, Neymar, but nevertheless, just his resume in terms of what he's achieving at a European club level, just to put some numbers to that, 8th player to score in multiple Champions League finals, the first Brazilian to do it, and the youngest player ever to do it. That's a mark previously held by Lionel Messi. He broke it this weekend, so he's only 23. Now, the challenge for any Brazilian is to stay motivated and stay in shape and not to make any dumb transfers. But if he can do that and keep this going for another several years and keep winning Champions League titles and scoring in finals, he's going to get to a point where his resume on paper is going to beat any other Brazilians at the European club level.
Boy, I don't know if you all heard that, but that was the challenge for any Brazilian is to stay motivated. I mean,
look at me. After a couple of years of this podcast, I've pretty much been mailing it in ever since then.
I'm consistently having to find ways to keep you motivated.
Yes.
Just to have you show up here is a feat in and of itself. All right. So congratulations to Real Madrid. We move on. Marco Reus, by the way, who did appear in the final, rumors are that he is going to the Los Angeles Galaxy.
Yes. So one German, Toni Kroos, went out a winner with Real Madrid, and now we'll see what he can do in the Euros with Germany. While the other one, Marco Reus, did not get his storybook ending. This was his last match for Dortmund. And yeah, there are strong rumors. Tom Bogert, Fabrizio Romano, and others reporting he's very close to a deal with the LA Galaxy, who are already playing well this season. Yeah. Puig, Peck, etc. And then if you add Marco Reus to the mix, that could make for a very tasty attack.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll be interested to see what kind of signing it is, the numbers involved, to the extent that we are privy to all that. But I think it's a solid signing. And again, it's not a signing of desperation from the Galaxy because they are a much better team this year and they can kind of afford to pick and choose going forward. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. Where should we go now?
So the other continental final on Saturday is one that we covered on FS1, the CONCACAF Champions Cup final. Pachuca claimed an emphatic 3-0 home win over Columbus, and it frankly wasn't even that close. Rondon scored twice. Emilio Rodriguez got the other. Pachuca win the CONCACAF Champions Cup crown for the 6th time. That's tied with Cruz Azul for the 2nd most, one behind America, while Columbus joined a list that includes RSL, Montreal, Toronto, the LAFC twice as clubs that got to the final of this competition but couldn't finish the job.
I mean, it was comprehensive from start to finish. There was one team on the field, except for the first minute where Columbus had an opportunity. And, ultimately the better team won. After the game, Wilfred Nancy let on that the team had some problems, some diarrhea, whatever it was from. Could have been water, could have been food, whatever it ends up being. That's not an excuse. And that's not why they lost. He made a point of saying that, but it does, it's part of the story. I thought it was disappointing from a Columbus team that at times has looked incredible, and it doesn't completely dismiss the incredible pathway and the success leading to it. But ultimately, all we care about is the winner. And in this case, in that compare and contrast with Liga MX and MLS, all the praise and all the kudos would go to Pachuca and therefore Liga MX in this pendulum going back and forth. After the game, Rob Stoner and I were talking and riffing about what this means, as we often do, and attaching meaning and all that. When you look at Pachuca, this is actually a model team in terms of doing more with less. Their ability to cultivate young talent, to use that talent in a successful way, and the smarts in which they identify the talent that they bring in, the Roldans and these types of players. That is a team that I think would function highly in an MLS world. Having said that, there is still a reality that MLS, because of the restrictions self-imposed, going into this tournament, and any international tournament for that matter, is left with one foot behind their back, playing with one foot behind their back. And I said that often. It's not that in this case, if you add up the different spends of the two teams, that they're not comparable. It's that in general, MLS is built for a competition within MLS. The manufactured parity is designed to have MLS teams function against other MLS teams. But unlike other leagues and other sports out there, soccer, and in this case MLS, there is an international element. And so when you take these teams out that are built to compete within MLS and try to have them compete at the international level, they suffer for it. And my point on air, and it has always been my point, is I would love to see what MLS teams look like in the context of CCC or any other international tournament if there were no restrictions. For 30 years, MLS has been successful, has survived and thrived because of the realities and because of the structure. But we have yet to see what MLS looks like when there are no restrictions, when there is nothing holding anybody back, and they are fighting a fair playing field with both feet in front as opposed to one foot behind their back.
Yeah, you said last week that part of you worried that if Columbus won this match, it would convince people that things are fine just the way they are. So to your point, the fact that Columbus lost the way they did means we are having this conversation again as to whether MLS needs to loosen restrictions and not have their clubs compete with one hand tied behind their back in these competitions, which I think is totally fair. I will say I know this is a topic as well, on the final being in Pachuca, it's not an excuse, but I do think the final of a competition like this either needs to be two legs or at a neutral venue, the way to do it in the UEFA Champions League and now the Copa Libertadores. It's a bit odd to have every previous round be home and away, and then you get to the final and it's one game at the home of one of the two clubs. Now, I know Pachuca earned that by having the better results in the previous rounds, but I still think conceptually it's an odd way to do it.
Why don't you want to reward people for being good? Because that's what the reward was. I understand what you're saying, and from a fairness perspective, but to your point, if MLS wanted to host this game, whether it's Columbus or anybody else, they should have done better because it's relative to the rankings that CONCACAF has come out with and the rankings at that point back in 2023 when they were made. That's why they were.
No. It was because of results in the previous rounds of this competition. Like Pachuca performed better
but it's relative to the CONCACAF rankings.
No.
I think so. I think that's okay. Maybe
well,
you're right.
We'll have to go over.
I would never go against the great David Mosse, so you were very well maybe right. But either way, do better then.
Well, I think the advantage there should be to host the second leg. So you are rewarding a team that performed better. But just to have it one match in that place, I thought was a little bit odd. The other thing is, for the second straight year, we made a big deal about it. A Liga MX team having an awkward layoff before the final. They hadn't played a match in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Didn't bother Leon last year against LAFC. Didn't bother Pachuca this year. So I'm going to stop making a big deal about that. Maybe it's a positive. Maybe it means they show up rested and they got to spend a lot of time focusing on the match.
You can't have it both ways. Everybody and their mother complains about the number of games and we're killing these players and people are going to strike and all that kind of stuff. And then when you get time off to rest body and soul, you're going to complain because it's too much time off? Come on. Anyway, congratulations to Pachuca. MLS back to the drawing board here. We'll see if anything does change going forward because, to your point, unless MLS actually cares about the result and the reaction to that result, then they're not going to change. They're not going to change anything.
So we'll see Pachuca in the United States next year. They qualify for the expanded Club World Cup. So we now know out of CONCACAF, Monterrey, Leon, Seattle, and Pachuca. And now all we're waiting on is that MLS host nation spot. We still don't know how they're going to award that. It could theoretically be something that Columbus could win this year, and then Columbus would end up there anyway. We'll see. They got to decide that soon. It's a bit farcical that we're sitting here and we still don't know who's going to get that spot.
Well, they have to rip the Band-Aid because if it's just going to be Don Garber deciding, like the commissioner pick during the All-Star game type of thing, and just say it and let all the screaming and yelling happen. But if it's relative to some sort of competitive finish, then say that too so everybody knows.
And as John Strong reminded us during the game, Pachuca also qualified for the Intercontinental Cup later this year. They're still going to have that on top of the expanded Club World Cup next year. So
good luck with that. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, we'll see if anything does change. Speaking of MLS, shall we turn to some action this weekend?
Yes. Busy weekend of action, including Inter Miami playing to a 3-3 home draw with St. Louis. Messi, Suarez, and Jordi Alba were the goal scorers for Inter Miami. Messi now up to 12 goals and 13 assists in 12 MLS games this season. That's the fastest anyone has ever reached 25 goal contributions in a season.
A really fun and entertaining game. St. Louis, they should have won it. It should have actually gone up 4-2 at the end, and they let Inter Miami, which has been, again, we talked earlier about Real Madrid's ability not to, put their head down and to come back. Inter Miami has also proven that it doesn't matter. They are always in the game, especially when you have a guy like Messi on the field, and they were allowed to come back and get a point. Not a great result from a Inter Miami perspective. The Messi goal, and it's magical, but there is this mesmerizing effect, and it's not just in MLS. Okay, throughout his career, he gets the ball and immediately, like moths to the flame, they close him. But that's only half the story usually, because he draws people in, and then he finds a good pass or a perfect pass. Not always a perfect pass, but a good pass. And then everyone checks out. And even in this moment, it was amazing to see this team that every team prepares and game plans for him. And yet a ball over to the side, immediately people are turning their heads. And in that split moment, Messi, in his way, finds the space. And consistently we are saying, how does he get so wide open? How does he get so wide open? Well, he does it because he's been doing it a long time. He's incredibly smart at recognizing and smelling, sensing where that space is. He uses the attraction that he has in the initial phase of a play to throw them off the scent, if you will. And then his quickness of movement and strategically where he posts up, and then his incredible technique, even in this goal, to sweep it in. He probably should have had another one in the same way with his magical left foot. Just a fun game to watch. Speaking of a fun game to watch, you see what happened over there in Salt Lake, my friend?
Yeah, first off, let me say this was Messi's last game for Inter Miami before he goes off to the Copa America. And it was a bad week for Inter Miami because on Wednesday, after we finished taping, they lost at home to Atlanta, and now they only draw here. If you look at the Supporter Shield standings, they're still on top. But if you do it based on points per game, because they've played more games than other teams, you've got Cincinnati above them, RSL right there, a couple of other teams lurking as well. This might be a more interesting
a marathon,
race.
Not a sprint,
And we thought, I mentioned RSL being one of those teams. They're atop the West. They hammered Austin 5-1. Arango with a hat trick, including a sensational goal from the halfway line, reminiscent of David Beckham against Wimbledon in '96. Arango up to 16 goals this season, top scorer in the league. In a world in which Lionel Messi didn't exist, he would be the MVP frontrunner.
Remember when Chicha played for LAFC and the whole Rodney Dangerfield type of situation that existed there? I mean, congratulations to him. This was a phenomenal goal. These long-distance goals, you always see the goalkeeper running back and flailing, and it's never a good look for a goalkeeper. But I do have to kind of forgive goalkeepers, especially in this day and age where we ask them to almost play like sweepers, being out. But if and when you get caught, and more importantly, if you have somebody like Chicho or anybody else that has the technical capability to hit it, it's a magical type of moment and deserves to be on repeat. It's going to be up for goal of the year. But if you saw him, he set up as if to hit a cross-field ball, and then either out of the corner of the eye or he was just being sly, he saw what was going on, and he just hit it so pure and perfect because you got to hit it with some power from where he was hitting it, and it went right down the middle. And as soon as he hit it, everybody in the stadium, including the goalkeeper, knew, oh my goodness, this has a chance.
I mentioned David Beckham against Wimbledon. The first person to even conceive of scoring a goal like this was Pele against Czechoslovakia in the 1970 World Cup, but he just missed. And there's one person that's pulled off a goal like this in a World Cup final. That would be our colleague and friend Carly Lloyd against Japan in 2015.
Yep, and it doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's a special moment and one that will go down in history. Some off-the-field news when it comes to MLS.
Yeah, it's funny. I mentioned that on Wednesday, Atlanta beat Inter Miami, so that ended up being Gonzalo Pineda's last win on the Atlanta bench because this past weekend they lost to Charlotte. They're languishing in 13th place in the East. And breaking news today, Tom Bogert reporting Atlanta United have fired Gonzalo Pineda.
I'm surprised it took this long, especially for a team like Atlanta that has the type of ambition and spends the type of money that they do. I think they, gave him every opportunity to right this ship. And this weekend, they were not just on the losing end, they were bad. And it's obviously needs a change. By the way, Carlos Bocanegra over there at Atlanta, I mean, he's got 9 lives or 12 lives or anything because, these are things that have happened on his watch. We know that Garth Lagerwey has come in. The interesting thing when we talked about Garth Lagerwey over at Seattle was we were always talking about, well, Garth came in and just kind of didn't change anything, has never really had the opportunity to put his stamp and make his mark. In the same way, now coming in Atlanta, Garth Lagerwey, and more importantly, if they're going to keep Carlos Bocanegra, they need to get this next one right because this is not good enough. They looked really, really bad. And yet coming off of a big win against Inter Miami. So we'll see if off-the-field changes influence the on-the-field performance when it comes to Atlanta United. International, should we go there?
Yes, the Emma Hayes era began in earnest this past weekend. The U.S. women's national team with a 4-0 friendly win over South Korea at Dick's Sporting Goods Park in Colorado. Tierna Davidson and Mal Swanson, each with 2 goals. The two teams will play again Tuesday, St. Paul, Minnesota, as Emma Hayes will look to make it 2 for 2 on the U.S. bench.
Yeah, so, the return of Mal Swanson and Macario and these types of players, I mean, it is just a embarrassment of riches when it comes to what Emma has to work with. And from a score perspective and a result perspective, this is great. We're not going to judge Emma Hayes on games against South Korea, friendly games in South Korea. Her first judgment, if you will, is going to happen this summer when it comes to the Olympics. And we look at the Olympics from a women's perspective, our women's team, a little differently than we look at it from when it comes to the men's perspective. And the Olympics have always had a much greater importance in the women's game than in the men's game. So I think it's fair and right this summer in terms of the way that we are going to judge Emma. But so far, so good. She's saying all the right things. She's doing lots and lots of press. Hopefully at some point going forward, we can get her here on the State of the Union, because I think she's a fascinating person. And obviously she's got a huge, huge responsibility and a wonderful, wonderful opportunity given all the talent.
It was interesting. She started Macario behind Swanson, and then Sophia Smith and Trinity Robin on the wings with just Haran and Coffey in the midfield. We talked about the U.S. having all these great attacking players and how many could they get on the field at once. It seems to be trending towards them playing almost like a 4-2-4 with only 2 midfielders, Haran and somebody else, and then 4 out-and-out attacking players. I know that players like Jade Shaw and Katerina Macario, you could call them a quasi midfielder, number 10, but it's really like playing with 4 out-and-out attacking players. So I think that's the lineup we're probably going to see, that formation we're probably going to see this summer at the Olympics.
Yeah, I saw a tweet from our friend Lakin over there, Lakin Littman, our Fox colleague, and she had said that because part of the story is going to be what changes Emma makes, especially that old guard. Some of them have already gone, but you're looking at your Alex Morgans and these types of players. She said that Alex Morgan's 4-year-old daughter and Emma Hayes' 6-year-old son have been playing together at the hotel while the team trains. It's a nice little story, but it's also a little strange. And again, the dynamic of this team is always part of the story and what's going on behind the scenes and the relationships and what's going to happen. But ultimately, this is high stakes in terms of performance, in terms of positions, and especially when you're talking about someone like Alex Morgan, who may or may not be involved this summer and going forward with the national team.
And again, we don't have to dwell on this, but Corbin Albert is somebody who played really well at the Gold Cup, seemed to be emerging as a starter in the midfield, and now it's a few games in a row where she hasn't started. You wonder if that's just for soccer reasons or the off-the-field stuff plays into that. Well, nevertheless,
I hope
she's somebody whose
reasons.
stock seems to be falling a little bit.
If it's for off the field, then we have completely lost the plot. Okay, anything else, my friend?
That's it.
All right, let's take a real quick break. When we come back, we're going to flip it to the Summer of Stars that is upon us and give you our best 11s from both of the tournaments that are happening. Don't go away. All right, welcome back. Well, we've been talking about it. The Summer of Soccer, yet another Summer of Soccer is upon us. The Summer of Stars, if you will, with both the Euros and Copa America, which, by the way, you can see on Fox throughout the summer, is upon us. And so we thought what we'd do is kind of highlight all of the incredible stars and the depth of talent that is going to be on display this summer. And so what I did is I went about putting my best 11 when it comes to the Euros with all the different teams and all the talent that's available, and then my best 11 when it comes to Copa. So we're going to start out with my best 11 when it comes to Euros, and we'll kind of go line by line here. We're not going to mention every single person. And look, you'll see when this comes up, it's very, very difficult because there is a lot of talent out there. All right, Euros. We are going to start off with the goalkeepers. You can't live with them. You can't throw them off the bridge, but they are a necessary evil. And I'm going to go right back to the well. I am going with the man, the myth, the legend, Germany goalkeeper, Manuel Neuer. Goalkeeper in name only because we know he loves to play the sweeper keeper, but you got Donnarumma, and we just talked about Courtois and these types of players that certainly could be there, but I'm going to go with Neuer. How do you feel about that, Mosse?
It's a defensible pick. We should note Courtois is actually not in the Belgium squad. Otherwise, I think he would have been the pick if he was available for the Euros. Donnarumma was the MVP of the last Euros, leading Italy to the title. And then other candidates, Oblak, Slovenia, very good. Mike Maignan, France. Yep. But Neuer is certainly a very defensible pick, so I'm okay with that.
All right, let's go to the back line. At left back, Teo Hernandez. And my center back picks, I got Antonio Rudiger and Ruben Dias. And my right back pick, I am going with Kyle Walker from England.
I know you considered Frimpong at one point. He's really more of a wing back, so you went with a more traditional right back and Kyle Walker, which I'm good with. The only change I would make is I do think you have to get Virgil van Dijk in there, so I would probably put Van Dijk in place of Ruben Dias.
Oh, you would?
Yeah.
I wanted to actually, the other side of it, what hurt me was I couldn't put Gvardiol in there, and I would have had to replace one of those guys. And so it's like, I mean, Saliba and like you mentioned, Van Dijk and Alaba and these types of players, there's a lot of good quality when it comes to the center backs. But you're okay with that. And you might have put Frimpong in there, but he's, as we said, a little bit more advanced.
The one change I would definitely make is Van Dijk.
You would? Okay.
Yeah.
I got it. All right, let's go to the midfield. I have Rodri. I have Kevin De Bruyne. And, hey, Jude Bellingham.
Impossible to argue with any of these three. I think these are the three best midfielders in the world, so you did very well there.
But, you got your Bernardo Silva and Wirtz and Rice and Tchouameni and maybe even Musiala and Foden, these types of players that certainly could play there. But you're good with that, all right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And again, all of these are picks. Please let us know if you agree or disagree and who you would have put there. We go up to the forwards. I have Kylian Mbappe on that left-hand side, Harry Kane up striker, and then Bukayo Saka over there on the right-hand side. And man, there are a lot of good quality possibilities and changes. Do you have any that you would make?
Well, I think Saka is going to end up playing on the right wing for England, so positionally you're okay here. But if it's about just getting the three best attacking players on the field, I would put Foden instead of Saka.
You would?
Yeah.
All right. So then we got, so we have obviously Gnabry and Dembele and Kvaratskhelia and these types of players. And, there's a lot of good talent when it comes to that. And then up top, I put Kane, but, Lewandowski's there. Even like Vlahovic and these types of guys, but I think at this point I'm good with that. And for those that know me, it hurts me to put so many England players in the roster. And to your point, I wanted to try to fit Phil Foden in there, but it just shows how stacked this England team, which means there's not a chance in hell that it's coming home. Let's move on to the Copa America pre-tournament best 11. Again, all sorts of talent and I'm sure all sorts of controversy and disagreement and or agreement when it comes to the things that I have picked here. Let's start going by lines. So in the back, I got your friend, your Brazilian, Liverpool goalkeeper and Brazil goalkeeper, Alisson.
It's certainly a defensible pick, but as much as it pains me to say this because I love Alisson at the international level, I think you could make a case for Emi Martinez, World Cup winner in 2022, made the greatest save in World Cup history in that final.
Yes, but he's living off of that great save. I don't think necessarily that he is as good a goalkeeper as you think he is.
He did have a very good season, helping Aston Villa finish in the top 4, qualify for the Champions League.
All right. So, but and then there's the Andre Blakes and the Keylor Navases and obviously Matt Turners and stuff like that. But
no Keylor Navas. Remember, he retired from Costa Rica. He will not be playing in the.
He will not be on the list. I thought he was on the list I had. All right. Anyway, should we go to the back line here?
Yep.
Okay. This is where it gets interesting. I am going to put Alphonso Davies as the left back. Then I got Gabriel, Araujo, and Danilo on my other positions in the back line.
All right, so a couple of thoughts here. Gabriel Magalhães, this is a real sort of club versus country disconnect. He's coming off a very good season with Arsenal. I know everyone in England rates him very highly. He hasn't been that good for Brazil. Frankly, if Militão was in peak form, he's coming back from an ACL injury, but if he was in peak form, I would argue Gabriel is the 4th best center back on Brazil's squad.
So you got Bremer and these types of players?
Militão, Marquinhos, and Bremer, I rate all above him. Okay. So I would put a Brazilian in that slot, but it might not be Gabriel.
But you qualified it saying Militão is coming back from a knee operation. So you put Bremer over Gabriel.
I would put Bremer, who was just voted the best center back in
What
Serie A.
about Sanchez, Davinson Sanchez?
Very good as well, yeah. But it's actually another Colombian I'm going to sneak into this back 4. At right back, I would go with Daniel Munoz instead of Danilo. Very good player for Crystal Palace, plays alongside Chris Richards there. Danilo doesn't even play right back at club level anymore for Juventus. He's more of a center back. But for Brazil, he does start at right back, so it's a perfectly valid pick, and he's solid. But I would go with Daniel Munoz instead there.
And Montiel and Murillo and these types of players?
Truth be told, it's not a great position.
No. Okay.
All right. And then you went with Alphonso Davies, who we know might play farther up the field for Canada, but he is a left back for Bayern Munich, so I think Canada is essentially playing him out of position. So I'm okay with you putting.
Well, I thought about going for Jedi Robinson there, but Alphonso Davies, we know he can start at left back and go all over the place. And my point is, if Alphonso Davies was playing for the U.S. men's national team, okay? He's not going to play where Christian Pulisic is playing over on the left-hand side, but he would, I think, would start over Jedi Robinson at that left-back position, and again, in name only because he just goes all over the place. So I'm okay with that. All right, let's go to the midfield. every midfield or team for that matter needs a good Alexis or Alexi. So I'm going to go to Alexis McAllister. I am going with Bruno Guimaraes and the GOAT, Messi.
Tell you what, why don't you name your forwards too? Because I'm going to sort of make a larger point that includes midfield and forwards.
Okay, so in an effort to try to get Christian Pulisic on the field and an American on the field, I got him going over there on the right-hand side, which enables me to have Vini Jr., who we just talked about, over on the left-hand side, and then Lautaro Martinez up in the striker position.
Okay, all good picks. I know you're going to get criticism for Pulisic, but it's perfectly defensible given the season he just had for AC Milan and his numbers with the U.S. national team.
But Rafinha, Rodrigo, even Bailey, and these types of players.
But a few different options here. You could tweak the formation, play Federico Valverde as the third midfielder, and then push Messi higher up the field. It would essentially be Messi playing in the hole with a front two of Vinicius and Lautaro Martinez.
All right.
So that's one way you could have gone. And then if you kept it at this sort of 4-3-3 setup, would be Rodrigo. Luis Diaz, I know, plays more on the left wing for Colombia, but if it was just about getting the three best attacking players on the field, remember, he was the breakout star of the last Copa America, coming off a good season with Liverpool, very good for Colombia. So Luis Diaz is another player you could have made a case for. But I don't think it's crazy to have Christian Pulisic on this team. I really don't, even though I'm sure folks on X will disagree with me on that.
Garnacho and when we just saw Solomon Rondon up there from a striker perspective, but I'm cool with Lautaro, Darwin Nunez, these types of players.
What's interesting is at the World Cup, Lautaro Martinez really struggled and got benched for Julian Alvarez. So it'll be interesting to see how this Copa America goes for those two. Lautaro is coming off the better season at club level. He was absolutely phenomenal for Inter Milan. So we'll see if he can reestablish himself as the starter there. Also worth noting, Bruno Guimaraes might leave Newcastle this summer. They might have to sell him because of financial fair play reasons, and he's getting linked to Arsenal, Manchester City, and Liverpool. If it ends up being Liverpool, then McAllister and Bruno Guimaraes could be teammates at the club level as well.
Well, look, this is before the tournament. After the tournament, we should revisit this and look at who actually lived up to the billing and who didn't, or who emerged. Because to your point, Mosse, when we have these tournaments, there are players that use them as kind of coming out parties and announcing themselves to the world if we haven't heard of them, or in the case of Vini, kind of living up to all of the praise from an international perspective. And we know there's people out there that when they're doing the assessment, they need that part to happen. So plenty of talent, as we said, in both of these tournaments on display, and plenty of depth. So let us know what you think of our 11s that we have here. If you agree, if you disagree with all of it, some of it, a piece of it, any of it. Anything else here, Mosse?
That's it.
All right, let's take another quick break. When we come back, it's time for Ask Alexi and my one for the road. Okay, welcome back. It's time for Ask Alexi, that part of the show where you send in your comments, questions, and concerns. You can use that hashtag Ask Alexi out there on all the social media platforms. Keep in mind that our handle out there on social media is SOTU with Alexi, or you can call into our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297, 657-549-2297. What do the folks want to know this show, Mosse?
First up, a question on X. Unleash_the_Oscar asks, does the U.S. have any chance of winning the Copa America 2024?
Okay, so keep in mind, the U.S. this will be the fourth Copa America that the U.S. has participated in, and in two of those Copa Americas, the U.S. has gone to the semifinals. So absolutely unleash the Oscar. The United States has a chance of winning Copa America. A lot has to go right. And we've already talked about the fact that if and when they come out of their group, there is a good chance they're going to face a very, very good team, a team that most of the world would look at as elite and most of the world would look at as better, the likes of Brazil. And so they're at some point going to have a consequential and seminal type of moment. And there are a lot of people actually that are talking about the fact that Greg Berhalter needs to have that and hasn't had that yet. So I'm really looking forward to it. This team that you have right now, again, playing at home, again, that much older and that much more experienced, again, in a way that maybe we haven't seen in the past with some of these players playing at the top of their game. You look at Christian Pulisic, you look at Weston McKennie, and Christian Pulisic, knock on wood, all these guys are healthy. Remains to be seen when it comes to Tyler Adams. I think that we should be incredibly confident and bullish about this team going into Copa America. I also think that there better be, a recognition that they need to do well in this tournament and are confident in doing well in this tournament. I know we're looking at 2026, and that is the ultimate goal. But I don't think that anything should be sacrificed this summer relative to 2026. And I do think that the performance this summer, good or bad, will directly relate to what happens in 2026.
You know, we talk so much about 2016, the Centenario that was here in the U.S. when the U.S. got to the semis of that Copa America, and then obviously 95, Uruguay, you were part of that campaign that got all the way to the semis. We don't talk as much about 93 in Ecuador. You were part of that squad as well. That was the year before the U.S. hosted a World Cup. What was that experience like?
It was huge, and we didn't know it in the moment. But I think that we did better in the 95 World Copa America because we had been to 1993. And for a lot of us, that was right when we came to the team. It was the summer of 93. We trained for 2 years in Southern California in residency. And so this was our first big tournament. And it was a eye-opening type of experience. Now, many of us had played in Olympics and that kind of stuff, but from an international full national team tournament. And it was great. We did not go on. And so from a performance perspective, it wasn't necessarily a success, but the experience that we got was vital.
There is some talk about this becoming the new normal, a tournament like this taking place every 4 years, and the next one in 2028 might be in the United States as well.
Listen, the more opportunity this U.S. team gets, especially leading up to 2026, to play against better teams in a competitive type of situation, the better off it is. So I think that this is going to be really, forming for this team, and I hope that obviously I hope that they do well. But to answer your question, yes, they have a chance. Do I put their chances higher relative to a Argentina or a Brazil? No. But at some point, the whole point of having Greg Berhalter and the whole point of this growth and this generation was to be able to compete against the elites, consistently compete and to beat the elites, and not to have this be a pie-in-the-sky, Pollyanna type of experience every single time we come up against teams that are better than us.
Be curious to see Chris de Bear Felica, how far he has the U.S. going.
Yes.
We know he's crunching the numbers right now, the odds. He'll come out with his picks at some point. Curious to...
Yeah, well, I mean, no matter what, I think you're not out of your gourd to pick U.S., but you will win some money. And the safe bet, as we said, is Brazil and Argentina. Okay, what's next?
Next, we have a voicemail. Let's take a listen.
Hi, this is Taylor from Coronado, California. I was wondering for both of y'all who your favorite player that plays through challenges is. One of the things that drives my dad and I crazy is seeing all the simulation that's going on nowadays, and we think back to players like Ronaldinho, Jay DeMerit, any of the guys that played through challenges. Who's your modern player that plays through and has that grit? Thank you. Love the show.
Okay, thank you for the call, and I get what you and your father are lamenting, and I appreciate the question. So I try to think back. I mean, look, while he is arguably the greatest player ever to play the game, when you look at Messi, his ability to ride off challenges and almost not just ride off, but even use the energy that a challenge, especially a challenge from behind, can create. It's really quite amazing. And he has been relatively durable through his career. I know we've seen some times that this year from an MLS perspective where he's taken time off. But considering the fact that everybody now for 20 years has tried to decapitate him on a continual basis and even in a group type of setting, it's pretty remarkable how he is able to ride it off. I do think that it is a characteristic that it's not the only place, but South America, and in particular when it comes to your Brazilians and maybe more so when it comes to the Argentinians, I think it is ingrained in them. And maybe from a young age, what is acceptable is different than other places around the world in terms of just trying to kill people, not literally, but trying to take their legs out and just being able to stand up or continue, or like I said, even use it going forward. Maradona, same way, and played in a very different time also, and he was able to ride through a lot. I'm not saying he didn't dive like others. In the modern sense, also, someone like a Darlington Nagbe, who I have talked about before, I think his ability to play through the challenges and his ability to use that physical nature, and he's not necessarily a big guy, and we talked Messi and Maradona weren't necessarily big guys, but they understand the mechanics of the human body, both how their body is going to act and how their body is going to react to other physical challenges. Mosse.
I just want to say thanks for the call, but that has to be the first time I've ever heard Ronaldinho and Jay Demerit lumped together. Those two names just kind of roll off the tongue.
Yeah, they do. I mean, if the question is relative to playing through pain and all that kind of stuff, I remember Marcelo Balboa, who did his knee before the 1994 World Cup and worked his ass off to get back and then star in the 1994 World Cup. So you can go through a lot of players that have gone through injury, worked very, very hard off the field, oftentimes in silence and away from the cameras, and then come back and start.
But yeah, to his point, the caller, I saw an interview once with Sergio Ramos where he was asked, what's the Ronaldinho's quality that most stands out to you? And everybody thought he was going to say the skills and the flicks and all that. And he said his strength. Mm-hmm. You go to tackle that guy and you bounce off him. Ronaldinho, if you go see at his peak at Barcelona, it was underrated how well built he was.
Valderrama was the same way. I mean, obviously he looks bigger than a Ronaldinho, but I never forget, at times we would try to put a man on him. Or in times even I would kind of step into the midfield and try to mark him. It didn't matter. And I'm a big guy, but it wasn't a low center of gravity. It was just the way he distributed his weight. So not only was he great at picking out incredible passes, but the way that he shielded the ball. I mean, from a young age, you should always be working on shielding the ball and using your body to your advantage. I do this with my kids, and anytime anybody asks me, it's not just about the technique. It's also about understanding angles and understand how using your body as a shield can help you buy time, can help you open up different spaces, and ultimately is a hugely, hugely underrated type of skill.
That's it for Ask Alexi, but that question segues nicely into your one for the road.
Yeah, so my one for the road, I started to think about tough players. And when we say tough, it is a subjective type of term. It could be tough physically, it could be tough mentally, it could be tough relative to the things that you have gone through in the past. It could be just the way that you present yourself. And, I often talk about how there are different personalities that emerge from players on the field. So if I think back about tough players, I mentioned the 94 World Cup. In that 1994 World Cup, we had a player, defender Clay Koyman. This is, if you have ever met Clay Koyman, one of the nicest, kindest, gentlest beings you will ever come across off the field. And yet you put him on the field and there is something that clicks. And this is a human being that then turns into a psychopath that will cut you down without a hint of regret, that will stomp on you, that will spit on you. And at times, I could not reconcile how this person was the same person that I hung out with off the field. And at times, it was to his detriment because he just could not control himself when it comes to the toughness. And by the way, he did step on the field without any of his ligaments in his knee, and it did show. But to his credit, he played through. When I think about toughness, I also think about competitiveness. And I might have mentioned this before on the pod, but the most competitive player, and therefore I think one of the toughest players that I have ever played with and or against, is Joe Max Moore. You will never find somebody who wants to win more at anything in life. And it could be playing a game of soccer. It could be playing a game of chess. It could be walking to the corner. He cannot fathom losing in anything. And if it's something that he is not necessarily good at or has tried, as soon as the competitive part of it becomes apparent, he will immerse himself in it to get better. And it's what has made him great. At times, it can be a detriment because you cannot turn it off. But we've all grown up and we've all known people like that are just ultra competitive. Now, sometimes it comes from family. Sometimes it comes from your upbringing. Sometimes it's just innate. But when I think of people that were tough, Joe Max Moore would gladly run through a wall in order to win and in order to help his team and in order to help himself.
You told a great story once on this pod that during a U.S. camp, you guys were playing ping pong, and Joe Max Moore was so competitive during these ping pong games, and the coaching staff observed that, and you think that actually played a part in him making it into a World Cup squad?
It was so we definitely had that, but I'll never forget Bora Milutinovic telling me years and years later when he was making the final cuts for the '94 World Cup team, that we played a lot of soccer tennis, and he had watched Joe Max Moore, and Bora was really good at soccer tennis. He had watched Joe Max Moore play soccer tennis and even play soccer tennis against him. And when it came down to picking one or the other of these last players, it was sometimes, it wasn't necessarily that somebody was that much better or worse, but he had to make an ultimate decision. Something had to weigh. And in this case, it was his competitive nature of just he just could not stand to lose. And you want somebody like that on your team.
That was the story. I screwed it up. I said
okay.
ping pong.
I remember playing, and something like ping pong, if you played Joe Max Moore could not just have a friendly game of ping pong or a friendly game of poker. That does not exist in his in his mind. And I love him for that. I couldn't necessarily relate to that, but like I said, it's what made him tick. And some people are just great because of that. So thank you for your questions. And we just, segued that right into the one for the road. I'm sure you all have people that you have grown up with, either in a soccer or a sports context or elsewhere, that are like this, that you want on your team, and maybe are very, very different people on and off the soccer field, or the same people, just completely ultra competitive. And they test you. And sometimes they make you better. Mosse, anything before we go?
Yeah, just to bring this back full circle, we opened the show by talking about the fact that last week we taped a new opening for this podcast that we're going to unveil during the Summer of Stars. And some of the people that worked on that with us, like Carla, Mason, John Hill, have wandered into the studio today. So I do want to shout them out because they all did a phenomenal job on Friday. That John Hill has a future in this business as a director because, he's very good at making the talent feel like he actually respects their ideas. There was one point where I put sunglasses on and I asked him, should I wear this? And you could tell he thought that I looked like an idiot, but the way he said it to me was, no, I really want to see your eyes.
Hey, it is a skill and an art to be able to talk to talent, and to make it seem like it's their idea, or to judge them in a different direction. And skillful and artful are all of the men and women that did this. And you will see, like I said, going forward. By the way, a reminder, later on this week, we will have our picks on the pod of Euros and Copa America. So look for that going forward. We got all sorts of stuff that's coming out going forward when it comes to this incredible summer of soccer. All of these stars, as we've talked about, that are on display, and it's coming right around the corner. I will be off to New York this week to do some promotion out there for this summer that we have upon us. But we will have shows for you, and I will certainly be in contact, and you can follow me on all our different travels out there. Thank you for reviewing and downloading and subscribing and doing all the different things that you do. We will talk to you again later on this week. And until then, and as always, my friends, size the